The one thing, like a week or two ago, when we were on doing the political Bitcoin hour, and you came in, really set that guy off with all wars are bankers wars. I would
Yeah,
love to kind of touch on that quick and kind of have you
sure.
explain that, because I think that's obviously, like, that was really an emotional thing that guy was going through, rightfully so, obviously.
We have today one of the biggest playable characters in a sea of non-playable characters. In a world where people can't think, they only conform, they don't ask questions, they don't ask why or how or what. We have none other than Shane Hazel today, someone who has seen everything from around the world, traveling around, being in the military, to the fiat legacy political system that we have here in the United States, the maturation process he's going to walk you through today, from a young man to an adult now with three children, wife, homestead, building citadels, what he's doing with the veterans, what he's doing about homeschooling, talking about small modular nuclear reactors, AI, 3D printing, what's going to happen in the future with politics, with our voting system. Do we want credibility or do we want ease? The Milei election in Argentina that just happened, libertarians on the rise, on the move, and governments being put on notice that they work for the consent of the people, period. Mr. Shane Hazel, enjoy.
Mr. Shane Hazel, thank you so much, brother, for coming on here, and just really appreciate everything you do in the Bitcoin space. And it's very needed. There's not a lot of political prowess necessarily, and people actually being in those positions or running for office. So you have a unique perspective, and I can't wait to touch on some of the things. Thanks for joining, brother.
Brandon, it was if people don't know our a little bit of a history, man. I think it's maybe worth highlighting. Brandon and I actually met at a
True.
PD this year at the pleb party. And I appreciate you having me on first and foremost. But it was funny is I think you walked up with Anders and we
Yeah.
just started talking and kind of like diving into each other's background a little bit. And you're from the same high school my wife went to at the same time my wife was there. Her and her little brother Nick, and so yeah, it was one of those things where we just kind of hit it off, and I was just like, all right, man, like we gotta catch up. And I think we got interrupted from like there throughout the
Yeah.
conference. So it's good to be
Whatever.
hanging out with you.
Exactly. No, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. Cool. Well, yeah, let's roll right into this. There's obviously the melee stuff. We were just talking off stage about that. But what I want to do, kind of set the stage for people, because this is obviously a big thing in the Bitcoin world, obviously a libertarian world, the Bitcoin world. Some of the questions, again, I was thinking of you, of, hey, someone who's run for office, can politicians fixing? So we can kind of touch on Melee a little bit, and what maybe some people aren't caught up on, like, kind of what the kerfuffle is about him, and in some of your experience, and then also, like I said, some of the military stuff, and kind of how your views have changed over the last 20 years, seeing things from the inside, and it really, being on the inside in a way, to a degree. So take it away. It's the Melee thing is the hot topic. So give us a rundown on kind of him, what you know about him, and then we kind of go to your perspective.
Yeah, I think Javier is a really interesting case study for what's going on in the world. Despite his past and maybe some of his dealings with the WEF, and some of the talk about moving to the U.S. dollar for currency as a standard. There's something that happened down there that's just absolutely undeniable in terms of Argentina. Like, Argentina has been debased and has had currency after currency failure over my lifetime. Which is only a little
Really, since we were born,
yeah,
like a half dozen of them, right?
yeah. And then we see this throughout the world too. Is that's a problem. Obviously, if you've got a currency for your nation, and then you are I guess at the U.S. dollars, mercy. If they print a little bit, the dollar debases their currency as much as it debases ours, and then some. And so to see this happen over and over again, I think the people in Argentina, who were so advanced, especially coming into the 1950s and 60s and 70s, kind of had their world fall apart after the whole unpegging from gold here in the United States, and kind of the vaporization of the U.S. dollar. So yeah, to see what's transpired down there, this is an absolute referendum. And the way Miley did it, good, bad, or indifferent, is he had absolutely brash, in your face, unapologetic messaging with a libertarian solution. And it doesn't mean he's going to do anything with it. It doesn't mean that anything else happened. But I think that's the one thing that people can at least agree on is this guy came out just calling these people parasites. He called them murderers. He called them, everything in the book that he possibly could. And it was righteous outrage. And I think that righteous outrage is, has tapped in. And so, to anybody that's out there that's listening, if you think you're going to, play with the establishment, you're going to play with the banks and the tycoons and, the elite politicians in a, friendly way, let's, Javier be an example for you guys is, if you're going out there because you're going to war.
Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise because the algorithm hates truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
I mean, literally, the next steps in this entire process, if this kind of stuff doesn't happen and there's not some sort of valve for the populace, these things go into a spiral, and that last step in that spiral is, is the war machine. And so for these guys to say, hey, listen, the last thing we want to do is get into the war machine, and we want to at least give this guy an opportunity to kind of, right the ship, if you will. I think it sends a giant message in terms of how you should go about this. And if you are going to run for, a political office or just create a scene while running for political office, this is what you got to do. So, yeah, I think that's the one huge takeaway from this that I think a lot of people, want to miss through, you've seen it as much as I have. He's like, oh, he's like Trump, or, oh, he's, like Ron Paul, or, whatever the case is.
Trying to label.
Yeah, everybody's trying to do this equivocation thing, and it really doesn't work. So, the last thing, I guess I'd say is just, if that's your prerogative, you think you're going to, make a dent in maybe the U.S. political machine, or maybe, you have a real opportunity in whatever country you're in out there. Great. But, we can get into, how that might look here in the United States and kind of, I guess what I guess my perspective on that would be.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do, because I was thinking just something this morning. It was a tweet someone had. I think it was a Pastor Coin on Twitter, who's an awesome follow, and he, I made a comment about something about sheriffs. He had something about anti-police, and people were like, oh, and I was like, well, the sheriffs are there to protect the Constitution, and the police are there for the state. I mean, that you have to see for things for what they are. And I think people have a really hard time being able to hold opposing opinions in their head at some time. Like you can have 1,000, policemen in your family, and it doesn't mean they're bad people, but the apparatus they're in might not be a great apparatus. And we have to be able to accept those things in order to affect change and start working on things. And I think that's where so many of us, and my own cognitive dissonance is always, the log in my eye is always worse than the splinter in someone else's eye. And we just have a hard time realizing, hey, it's not so black and white. There's gray areas, and we have to be able to accept that. And it's not just good guy, bad guy. And so I touch on that, but also I want to go into some of this, the consent of the governed, like you said, the escape valve, the governments of the world, no matter if you're in America or not, is you work for the consent of the governed, no matter what, no matter if you're a king or not, if your people are revolting, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. You still work at the consent of the governed no matter what. And I think those are the big things that are really starting to come about, whether it's Brexit, Trump, all these things, we're starting to see these dominoes.
Yeah, I mean, seeing this from a U.S. mindset, I guess, U.S. centric at least.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If we're looking at this from a U.S. centric mindset, the idea, and I've run as a Republican in 2018 for U.S. Congress. I've run as a Libertarian for Senate and governor of Georgia. So to kind of understand, what the odds are first and foremost, and then secondly, the game. The game is one of those that I don't think people can assess, the right way until, and maybe you can, maybe you don't need the hard lessons that I've gone through, but maybe you get to that point and you see from experience, and so maybe you have a little bit of a little bit of conviction in this that maybe most people wouldn't, a little more experience. So I see it as this, and I make this comparison to a sandbox all the time. If you're a kid and you're playing in your neighbor's sandbox, with their kid, and you guys are having a great time, you're trading toys, you're trading sand. It doesn't seem like there's anything nefarious possibly going on, but lo and behold, the neighbor's got a cat, and that cat comes in there and he shits in that box all the time. And we know cats carry things like toxoplasmosis, which is a not a deadly disease, but it can be, obviously. But it's a disease nonetheless. And so every transaction those kids are having in that sandbox is accompanied by a third-party parasite. And that is exactly what you have here in the United States, especially in the political realm. A lot of the zombie industries as well, and obviously the banking cabal that's out there. But if you're literally playing in their fiat sandbox, which you are, every transaction that you have is somehow linked back to the people who run the printing presses, the people who can print money out of thin air for nothing. And so when you start to look at this centralized system that we have that rewards the people who are closest to the money printer with money because they will carry out the policies that they want to see, it lends itself towards the banks making more money, right? Like, and that's the thing, is like whatever they can do to make more money as banks, to have more capital, to have more on their ledger and everything else out there that's coming into them, well, that lends itself towards tyranny in a fiat system. If you're a parasitic class, you've got to make money off of the population somehow. And once you start to really understand like where CPI is since 1913, and the resolution that I should say the law of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, you start to really understand all your performing asset classes aren't really coming in at 8%. They're coming in far below that in most cases. It doesn't matter if it's the best part of the S&P, doesn't matter if it's oil, treasury, gold, silver, you name it, none of it. So to see that you're playing in the sandbox and that the people that will carry out their policies will get awarded the money first and foremost. If you're on that liberty kick, if you're a libertarian, if you're, let's just say you're a Ron Paul from the Republican side or something like that, you think in any situation that you're going to be funded, or you're going to have the machine that creates, money out of thin air, that, gives it, I should say, that it legalizes this plunder. First and foremost, you have Congress that legalizes the plunder. The money's created, bonds are sold, the money goes into the economy, it goes to zombie corporations, the MIC, the banks, and the politicians get what comes back to them in PAC money, which is absolutely obfuscated, right? You can't see, like what's going on there. So when you start to see it, you're just like, dude, this is just a giant money laundering wheel. And the people who are on Liberty's side don't even have a crack at, the type of funding that it would need to actually put up a real resistance fight in a campaign. So, here in America, I've kind of resigned myself to the idea that I have a giant network of libertarians. I've got a giant network of people that are anti-war. I've got a giant network of people who would like to see a lot of the state, absolutely be eviscerated. And at the same time, continue to, like, 93% of the time, reinstall the same people that got, voted in the last time. So, we're in a really weird place here in America, right? Like, I don't think we really have a political means left. I think a lot, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, even down here in Georgia during a primary when I ran as a Republican, when all other districts were turned in and most of the offices that were in my district were turned in, we were waiting around till 1 o'clock in the morning when we were crushing the incumbent in the polls by, like a giant amount, like 30% in the polls. And we ended up getting our results later on into the night, and we lost. So am I saying that it was outright fraud? I don't know, but it just seems like, no
and
matter.
that's the problem. No one knows. You nailed it.
and that's, yeah, and they'll say, no, there's no voter fraud. Well, all right, so define there's no voter fraud. What is the allowable amount of voter
There you go.
fraud that's out there? Like what, and they'll never give
What
you
are
a
we gonna
number
accept?
because
No.
they can't. So yeah, I mean, you can do all the things in the world. You can knock on 30,000 doors. You can be pretty well known in terms of name ID. You can be crushing your opponent in the polls. You can raise a decent amount of money, you know, with your force multiplier effect of actually having a population that's behind you. And you can do all the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes, even as a Republican or one of the two main parties. And at the end of the day, if you're not the guy that the people who are at the highest levels want in that office, you're not going to be in that office. And that's the real, I think, picture that Americans don't really understand.
Boy, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just like, again, we joked earlier, we could spend, literally multiple pods just kind of talking about this very thing. And some of the questions I already had on here before we even jumped on were, can politics fix things? And you just kind of, mentioned it a little bit right there, seeing things from a perspective most people don't get to see, that there's not many political means left, so what can politicians do? What do we have left in politics? I mean, I love the quote of Plato of, if you're not involved in politics, you're going to be governed by your inferiors. And, maybe that worked for thousands of years, and maybe Bitcoin is the only answer. I don't know. Maybe it's not. And I think that's what a lot of us are working through. I mean, what are your thoughts on what are the political means left? Because you have this apparatus where none of us, whether it's good or bad, whether you win or lose, doesn't matter. Like, none of us know if it's credible. And it's not that maybe there wasn't cheating on the day of, like people saying, hey, and this is the problem, that either no one can confirm or deny what I'm about to say, which is maybe the machines were fine, or maybe they weren't, but we had 90 days of voting or a month of voting or 10 months of voting before. No one even knows. And so much of it is just up for, like, we have no idea. No one can tell you what happened. And so we either choose ease or convenience. And I think Bitcoiners, Nolan Bowerley talked about this all the time, and he talks about ease and convenience, and Bitcoiners are so well suited for the debates and the discussions that are coming up, obviously, over this next year and going forward, because you either have convenience, shit coins, or you've got credibility, Bitcoin. And the voting systems are now on the block now as well. So people are starting to see this from a totally different light, and it's going to really start to open people's eyes.
Yeah, there's some really interesting things happening in this area. To kind of come back and circle into what happened down in Argentina. They have a country of about 42 million people down there, and they used paper ballots, and they had it all counted within 2 hours. It was done. It was over. If that was something that we could actually pull off as a people to demand and have paper ballot type of elections, I think you'd still be better off. I think you'd have far less corruption. I'm not saying it would be zero by any chance, but the fact that we can't quantify what the fraud is now, I think is probably one of our biggest problems. So with that said, there's a couple alternatives, obviously, to sticking with the system we're at now. The one, especially in the Bitcoin community, that nobody wants to see is this thing degrade into war. Corey Clipson's got a great piece over there at Swan, The Race to Avoid War. If you don't know it, definitely go check it out. There's a video floating around about it too. And it's a fantastic piece. And he's 100% right in terms of everything that we can do now to avoid this, this conflict. There's civil unrest that's going to grow. And unfortunately, as the dollar continues to be, just absolutely printed out of existence, it's going to wipe out a lot of people with a lot of means. And that's an interesting prospect, because when you start to wipe people out that have beat life, right? I mean, let's think. I mean, we all know, the whole saying in Bitcoin that there's 45 millionaires, and than will ever, or 45 million millionaires in America alone, and most of them will never own a Bitcoin. Okay, well, those people probably have land. They probably have a lot of assets at their disposal. They probably also have a lot of guns at their disposal. So it's not that they won't have a means, it's that they won't have any way to peacefully, go about making those means important enough in their own community, in their own life, in their own society. And when you leave people like that with a bunch of means that got wiped out by a banking class, or got wiped out by a political class, or whoever they perceive to be the bad guy, bad things happen. That's when revolutions happen. And so, I guess the the race to avoid war is for us to go out there and make as many Bitcoiners as possible, because as this thing collapses, you want that redistribution of wealth into a valuable asset class to really be in the hands of people that are good people. You don't want it in the Black Rocks and the Fidelities and the State Streets and the rest of these organizations out there that have tens of trillions of dollars that have made tens of trillions of dollars on leveraged money, on some sort of you know lack of a better term, I guess, is on some facet of the dollar that's absolutely bankrupted and killed millions of people, if not I'd say tens of millions of people around the world in the 19th century. And so there's no mistake that when we introduced central banking here in the United States in 1913, that the 1900s became one of the bloodiest epochs of human history on the largest scale possible. We've been at war, ever since the inception of the Federal Reserve. And so, to see this asset class gaining the momentum that it's gaining now, to see Bitcoin really start to come into its own, the fact that you've got maybe one of the most powerful people on earth, Larry Fink, going from Bitcoin's going to go to zero, it's basically a shit coin, and I wouldn't be caught dead doing this. To have a guy like that turn around and do 180 degrees and have to eat shit on national TV while begging the SEC, please get us a spot ETF so that they don't come after us for the guillotine or the any of that. That's where bankers are at right now. And I think they know enough history, they've got enough smart guys to where they're going, guys, if we don't do this the right way, if we don't somehow make it at least look like we're preserving the wealth of these people in the tens of trillions of dollars, they're coming after us. Guarantee you they're coming after us. So yeah, Bitcoin's got it's this amazing peaceful weapon that's never going to have to fire a shot, that at the same time, as people are self-motivated in their own interests, very Ayn Randian, right? As they get to the point where they're pushing the everybody that we talk about, I call them the murder cult. It's this wicked combination. The anti-federalists call them the aristocratic combination. And now you're starting to see how Bitcoin and the plebs and the rest of this amazing community is forcing the hand of the most powerful people on earth to do something.
Yeah, well said. You made me think of a couple of things and trying to take notes here and stuff like that. And it's one thing. It's always funny when I see a contract for. But first off, actually, before I say this, it's not the Bitcoiners. So like you have the media and like, oh, Bitcoiners are psychopaths and like whatever, and libertarians get jumped in this group right now, and people on the right, whatever. And it's not those people that you have to fear. It never is. History has always shown us that. It's always, like you just mentioned, it's the people that had these means, and then all of a sudden they're without means because they're swimming naked. We see who's swimming naked, who's actually providing value to society, and who's not. And all of a sudden they're exposed because the banking system collapses or something like that. Or it's you can get into the intelligence agencies and Lee Harvey Oswald and things of that nature. But a lot of times, whether it's John Wilkes Booth or you can go on and on and on. It's generally the Fabian socialist, the Marxist side of the apparatus that's doing things, and the color revolutions, and the people that are going ape and just going nuts and feeling out of control in their lives. It almost never, in my experience, in my studies, is the people who are the Bitcoiners or the people that are studied and understanding the world at a common sense level and just kind of seeing what's going on for what it is. So I wanted to say that, number one, because like you said, I think bankers are sensing that, like the French Revolution type of stuff. But we're the good guys. The Bitcoiners are the good guys. We're trying to save the world, and that's where it's like we're getting the blame put on us. I find that hilarious. It's going to happen more, I think, too. But column 11. Lono on Twitter does a great job of this. If someone came back from adopting Bitcoin a couple weeks or a week or two ago, and like, hey, we might have the Oracle problem. We can solve, put voting on the blockchain and things like that. Lono, and I'm not an expert in this area, but from what he had said before, is there was a lot of issues with putting people into digital things, obviously, and now you can see forever what people voted as, things of that nature, which can be very destructive, as we well know. And Rene Carmel was born in the late 1800s, died in a concentration camp in World War II. And Lono talks about this guy coming up with like the punch card system and a bunch of different stuff. And column 11, which I was trying to research, and he sent me this, and I'll try to link to this too, but looking into this because it was the way to, because it was the Jews and what was happening. They were trying to track people certain ways. So anyway, I'll link to this, but it's a really interesting thing for people to get into, because talking about what we're talking about, whether it's blockchain, Bitcoin stuff, but also just voting, credibility of elections. So I think that's a really interesting thing to, again, get into as well. But
there's
anyway,
a guy out there, Brett Morrison. Do you know Brett Morrison by any chance?
I don't think I do.
So Brett Morrison actually used to work for Elon down at SpaceX, right? And he's a great Bitcoiner. He is working on, I think it's called True Vote. And he's on Twitter. I think he actually just posted something I posted earlier today. It's
Okay.
yeah, he's working on solving this issue, through coding. And I'll tell you right now, like, I've interviewed Brett. Brett is a great mind. He is a solid Bitcoiner. He's a good dude in general. And the fact that we've got guys like this that are trying to tie this to a blockchain of sorts, based on Bitcoin, like, it gives me a little bit of hope. I would be much better off with paper ballots, but at the same time, if somebody can actually skin this cat and make it work, somebody's got to try. And there's going to be a bunch of naysayers out there, but the guy that's actually down there in the arena that's trying to make this thing work, I think is worth at least our attention. And maybe, hey, go get him, man. Like,
Right.
I hope it works for us.
100%. And it's because it's, someday, whether it's next year or 100 years from now, someone's going to figure out something where people can be protected and safe, and we can have credibility in the voting and election. So it will happen. We just don't know when, obviously. So that's very cool. I'm going to look into him. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I always think of, when I was saying this earlier and I stopped, was when I see like someone sign a massive contract, former hockey guy here or something like that, whether if I'm watching sports, and I always think, how much Bitcoin do they have? Like, that's great.
Yeah.
$40 million is awesome, but those are trash tokens. Like, how much Bitcoin do they have? I always think of that. So it's funny you brought up the 45 million millionaires. But I want to segue it a little bit into you, and you touched on this a little bit too, but the bankers are really, all wars are bankers' wars. And you've triggered some people. I've witnessed it myself. Very heated things, talks, especially the last month or so. But I would like you to go into this a little bit more about, you touched on a little bit, but the bankers really control. I think of like the Vickers selling ammunition, I think it was World War I, selling ammunition to both sides of the aisle during World War I, both the Axis and the Allies, stuff like that. Go into this more, and kind of how this is a pervasive thing. We keep seeing this, the history of a lot of this, right? Especially the last 100 years, is central banking coinciding with massive global war.
Yeah, I wish I had a different opinion of this. I'll start off by saying I wish I was wrong about all of this, because I found this out the hard way. After 9/11, I was I was in boot camp by November 7th after 9/11. So.
Wow.
I mean, I was about to go into my last year of college, and was like, man, college will be here when I get back. And if I get back, then it'll be paid for too. So I knew we were going to have a fight. I knew and that was kind of, what happened in America at that time. Is I think everybody was somewhat together. Everybody was like, we just got hit in the mouth, and we have to respond. And kind of to tie this into what you're referencing is we were in the spaces together. This was very shortly after the
week or two later, probably
October 7th attacks in Israel. And emotions were running high from a lot of people, and a lot of people that have never seen combat, that don't really understand what it is and the ramifications of it, to see a bigger picture. And I guess I got up on stage and shared some of the understanding that I have. And so my understanding was brought about. I was in the initial invasion into Iraq in 2003, and then I thought we had actually done. I thought, hey, what, mission accomplished. Our team got pulled out. We got sent back to the States to train up for the next what they call Marine Expeditionary Unit. So we got separated from our own company at that time, which was Force Reconnaissance, which was it was a special operations unit. And as we were coming back, I was like, hey, we did it. Mission accomplished. We went in there, we smacked these guys in the face, and we're not going to have to worry about Saddam Hussein and any of the extreme, quote unquote, Islamists that that are being harbored in this country. And boy, I guess it was probably about April when I saw Marines on rooftops in Fallujah fighting in, basically sleeveless shirts and everything else because it was so damn hot. Just rocking on, the 240s and 50 cals, and, just seeing like it was still like the fighting was now getting even crazier. We were on a ship later that month, and by July, we had hit the shores in Kuwait, and were being processed up into the Najaf area in Iraq. And Najaf, if most people don't know this, is the home of the Abraham's cemetery, which is gigantic. It's got a bunch of catacombs. It runs miles and miles, and it's on this escarpment, like these cliffs. And right before you get to the cliffs, there's this place called the Imam Ali Shrine. So Imam Ali Shrine is the second holiest site in all of Islam. And we, as soon as the Marines took over, we picked a fight with Muqtada al-Sadr, who happened to be a Shiite, who I thought we were there to support, and things got weird, right? So we're fighting these guys through the graveyard. Some Marines die, obviously. A lot of them get injured. We get these guys surrounded in this place called the Imam Ali Shrine, and we wanted to flatten it. The Marines were like, "Hey, let's flatten it." We had, this thing that we could laze the building with, and drop a JDAM or 4 on it, and and instead of that, Muqtada al-Sadr, the Grand Ayatollah Sistani, and some Washington bureaucrats got together. They brokered a peace deal, and we had to watch these guys walk out. And that was like the first crack in behind the scenes, like, hey, like, I thought we were actually here to make sure this shit never happened again. Things were ramping up. And now the guys that you told us to go and fight on this battlefield, we're going to watch them walk away. How do you think that's going to go? We just killed a bunch of their guys. We just maybe killed some of their sons, maybe their fathers, some uncles. How do you think this is going to go? So fast forward, a couple months, or actually not even a couple months, by early or late October, my team had got called up. They said, hey, you're getting assigned additional tasks. You're going to go up and do all the reconnaissance on the breach points for Fallujah Part 2, Operation Phantom Fury, in November of 2004. So we went up there. We started doing the reconnaissance for the breach points all along the northern part of the city and the train tracks in Fallujah. And as soon as everything kicked off, we got thrown into the fight with the grunts, because the grunts, sustained some extremely heavy losses, whether it was KIA or, mobility casualties, things like that, just taking a beating going into the city. And so we fought, through the city with the battalions 3-1, 1-3, 1-8, just kind of teaching these guys how to move through an urban environment as tactically as possible, and, do some clearing that, they really hadn't trained for. So, we were at the head of these kind of things. So we pushed through the city for a month. And as, it kind of dawned on me, like, I guess, we were absolutely destroying this city. I mean, from top to bottom, everything from the homes, the apartments, the businesses, the industrial areas were absolutely being annihilated. And, with that, some, what people will call casualties, but, innocent people as well. Despite the fact that we did psyops on the front end of this to say, hey, everybody get out of here. And it sounds very familiar. It's like, hey, if you're not here to fight, if you're not Al Qaeda, if you're not ISIS, if you're not, the Hamas, type, whatever it is, whoever's trying to sell this, there's like, hey,
you're looking for trouble. Yeah.
We're coming in. We're bringing 10,000 Marines with us, or whoever you're bringing with you. And we're going to come in here and absolutely annihilate everything that you hold dear, anything. So we did that, and I got back to the the mech, which was our base after this was all said and done. And I read this book by a guy named John Taylor Gatto, is The Underground History of American Education. And I think this is probably, my first big red pill. And it talked about 1700s Prussia education being hoisted into the United States during the late 1800s, and then, mechanized by Henry Ford and John Carnegie. And when they did this so that they could do one thing and one thing only, and that was cultivate a population that was easy to guide and move, whether it was an industry or whether it was war. And when I found myself reading this going, oh my God, they indoctrinated me from the age of 5. I bought into this thing wholeheartedly. And now we were over here, doing unspeakable things to a civilization that we would find out, first of all, didn't have the weapons of mass destruction, wasn't part of Al Qaeda for, anything. And you've got to, what Scott Horton, the great Scott Horton, by the way, will say, as a clean shaven chin, Ba'athist over there, and Saddam Hussein, who was democratically elected, what are we doing? And, for me, that's where it kind of just dawned on me, like what had happened. And you kind of fast forward years and decades now. And when we spent as much time and blood and effort and our youth and in a place like that, the question is why? We saw Fallujah fall back to ISIS and all of that during Donald Trump. And, I've had calls with my buddy, and to see, like what we had seen and then understand, like, dude, all of this was for naught. All of this was, this big boondoggle for the MIC. It was a boondoggle for the banks. I mean, the Pentagon had, I don't know, I think they had
What's just for people that don't know, what's the MIC?
The military industrial complex. So, all your giant organizations out there that make armaments for the, the US military, yep, that can never be satiated. It was for those guys. It was for the people that were, pushing, the prospecting of the soil, I should say what's underneath the soil over there. Not only there, but obviously in Afghanistan as well. And then to really kind of see, what it was, you were like, man, this was a boondoggle on the behalf of the bankers, on behalf of the politicians and the MIC, not to mention, some of the other organizations, whether it's, oil or, mining companies or, what we do with the IMF and World Bank in terms of coming in, setting up all sorts of, debt structuring programs, and then installing our puppets via the CIA and State Department. And, once you start to see, exactly how this whole organism works, you really go, man, at the crux of this is the idea that in a fiat system through fiat banks, if you don't spend more money faster, you're going to have a recession. And if you have a recession that's not fixed, you're going to have a depression. And so how do they know how to do this? It's just war, it's conquest, it's a quote unquote American interest. And that's the entire game of this fiat complex.
The most I was thinking of the CIA, Mossad, stuff like that, and I think that's where some of the spaces went a little bit earlier too. But I was reading this book. I want to remind me about Mitch McConnell and what he said the other day. But I was the Conspirators Hierarchy, the Committee of 300, was the old British MI6 guy, and it was written like 30 or 40 years ago, and he was writing this for like decades before that, and it was basically this whole power structure going back like 300-400 years. People can say like the Rothschilds, stuff like that, and it basically coincides with that. I think some of the Rothschilds are in this book, obviously, but the general gist of the story is it's a hard read in a way. It's like only 200 pages, but it's just like information. Every sentence is like almost like information. It's like an encyclopedia almost, but it basically outlines and actually has a tree structured outline in the back of the book of the Committee of 300, like the 300 families that, like you said, there's these different whether it's the Warburgs or the Rockefellers, right? All these different organizations, they've created hundreds of thousands of organizations that they are there to just uphold the structure basically. And like you said, whether war is there to profit off the resources that are there, or just create distraction, or keep people online, like it serves so many purposes. And that's where people just have no idea. Like you said, we've all been trained in this system last 100 years to just go along to get along and not ask questions and memorize things and stay in line. And then you look at like Mitch McConnell here now, like you said, like he's like, well, we got jobs going in. They're like, yeah, we're killing people in Ukraine right now. Like, what do you like? Well, our economy is going because of it, right? I mean, like the fact that like a human being can say that in America right now, and that's where like it's on both sides, guys. It's both sides. It's one party, it's a uniparty, and they're all it's a state versus you. That's it.
Yeah. And they've abdicated every bit of power they have in Congress, right? Like none of those dorks know the Constitution. I mean, maybe Thomas Massey does, maybe Mike.
Yeah, and like a handful max. Yeah, 500 people. Yeah.
And the thing is, they're largely ineffective, and then so to know that they've abdicated the power of war, they've abdicated the power of the purse, you know, those two things, especially to say, you know, look, we're just going to spend through AUMFs, you know, or, you know, some sort of, you know, omnibus type of spending. You know, they don't read it. They have
Egregious.
no idea what's going on. And, you know, there's this great quote by the late great George Carlin, right? Is you don't need a conspiracy when interest overlap. And when so it doesn't matter if it's Warburgs or, you know, Vanderbilts
Right.
or, you know, any like they all obviously, you know, were titans of industry for a long time.
Right.
When you know, when the 1800s came along and oil was starting to move, or whether it was steel or oil or whatever, you know, made them uh you know, the titans of their industry
Hmm.
came along. Well, it's like, all right, you know, how do we preserve this? What's next? What are we looking at? In you know, in terms of an entrepreneur way, they were working within this TradFi system that, you know, was gaining more strength and more momentum and made them richer. And so, you know, you start to see how these guys get paid, and you're like, well, we don't need conspiracy people. They're just acting in their own
Correct. Yeah.
interest. And so at
Yep.
the end of the, you know, if they say, hey, yeah, you know what, you know, we're bankers and that's our industry. Well, you know, if that's how you're going to build your fame and fortune and vast riches, if it goes south and it destroys an entire population, which are many amongst that, you know, amongst that time, then you better be ready for the fallout. And I think, you know, it's easy to kick that can down the road for a very long time, obviously, but now that our money bubble is starting to burst, boy, that's going to be very tough for those people that are in high positions for sure.
Yeah, it's such a great way to explain this. And you know, I think of like a game board. I don't know who was saying this before, but they said something like this, and like it kind of jived with like a thought I've had for like 15 years, and I kind of took it and ran with it a little bit. Where like for a long time, I was like, you know, the people on the left, the modern left in America, they only see like 5 to 10% of the game board, and it's because we live in this echo chamber, Marxist echo chamber, right? Media, academia, pop culture. It's constantly inundated every day, every second of your life with leftist, you know, socialist, whatever, Marxist propaganda, where people on the right see about 50 to 75% of the game board. And they know there's brainwashing on that side. They see the other side all day, and then they still have intellectual prowess to feel like, no, that's not right. Like but the thing I didn't realize, like when I was younger, when we were younger growing up, like you said, you know, thinking about going into the military or things like that, you don't see the money layer. And like you said, that when you see the money layer, like a Bitcoiner can see 90 to 100% of the game board. There is probably 90, 95, because none of us can see, like we said, this structure that's still like this top apparatus. There is there, but it's not a conspiracy. Like you said, it's not like people sitting around a table being like, hey, we hate humans, so we're going to do this. Are they doing things that are not good for humans? Yeah, of course. Like you said, this money layer is what's incentivizing
Yeah.
capitalism to look bad in a way. Like capitalism doesn't work when the money is effed up. Like it doesn't work properly. And that's the thing that we're all trying to like figure this out. But that was the thing that it really is like, oh my gosh. And just like in the last couple of weeks, I was like, that's what I've been thinking for like 15, 20 years, even since I was a kid. I was like, man, this side they don't see anything that's going on. And then this other side seems to get it, but a lot of them still kind of are like in a malaise. And when you are a Bitcoiner, you see the money being broken, that layer, everything becomes clear. You have like the right prescription glasses on. You're like, oh, I can see everything now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. You know, that the whole orange bill. I was sitting down with a buddy the other day, and we hadn't talked in a few years, and he's you know, now one of my clients, and he goes, you know, buddy, I just got to tell you, you know, I've been very red pilled since the last time we got to sit down and break bread. And I said, wait until you take this orange pill, right? And so I said, but honestly, you know, the red pill comes with a bunch of nihilism. Honestly, it does. It comes with a bunch of nihilism.
Kind of like gold bugs. Like a gold
Yeah.
bug is like you're waiting for the world to collapse and, you know, stuff like that. Yeah.
We're gonna fight our way out of this shit.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like, all right, hey man, this orange thing, man, there's actually a lot of hope over here.
There's
And
hope
so
in that. Yeah.
you
Yep.
kind of mentioned the correction and incentive, the communications protocol changing. And I think that's one thing, you know, I know we're getting, I don't know, close to 11:40 now. And it's one of those things where I see this as probably the greatest part of Bitcoin is that it's hope. I mean, right now we occupy about $600 billion of the $900 trillion addressable market, right? 600 billion. And with
Wild.
that, yeah, with that 600 billion, you're talking about such an infinitesimal amount. But here's what it's doing. It's gaining purchasing power over time. Is gaining power, right? And this is very Jason Lowry and in software, but like it's gaining power in the right, well, a lot of the right hands. And not, it's not, 100%, but it's gaining power in a lot of the right hands, where a lot of this is being redeployed to the Bitcoin sector now, because what's your legacy going to be? You got billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, basically. You got in super early, and now you want to see this thing succeed. So what are you doing? You're reinvesting it, you're redeploying it into the space. And to see now what Bitcoin's been able to do in places like El Salvador, hopefully we get it in Argentina, because I think their GDP is like, I don't know, number 23rd on the planet in terms of countries, not including U.S. states by any stretch of the imagination. But to see what it's doing in the face of this titan that is the fiat financial system, with their trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars, and then tens, if not hundreds of trillions of dollars that they push into everything that we've already talked about, plus the propaganda apparatus that they have. The fact that you are starting to see chunks of the administration, or whatever you want to call this murder cult, fiat banking cabal, they are getting beat. Every time they turn around, they have a new problem, because Bitcoin's creating a problem. Capital flight from there is being reinvested and redeployed, and at the same time is kicking the shit out of these guys that are outspending us, 1,000 to 10,000 to 1. And as this continues to go along, I see nothing but a lot of hope. I'm not saying it's going to be completely peaceful. I'm not, none of that kind of stuff. But I think in terms of unwinding this spring that has been created by this fiat system, you're starting to see a lot of that be taken out of these guys. And I'm, like I said, I guess I'm somewhat of an optimist, and I think there's a lot of work to be done. I don't think we can sit back on our laurels. I think this is where you throw the hammer down. But when we're looking at where we are at and where we were and where we want to go, boy, you can't help but kind of sit back a little bit, take a moment, be really proud of this Bitcoin community that's doing this in the face of all odds and being successful. I mean, the psychopaths that went through the last 500 days and didn't only not sell but acquired as much as they possibly could. I mean, you can't beat those people. Those people are going to hold the most valuable bearer asymmetric asset on earth as long as they possibly can, and then redeploy it to the same people. It's a winning model.
It's crazy too, because there's no leader, right? Like Bitcoin has no leader. That's what's wild, right? Like Bitcoin doesn't ask a human to change who they are and like their DNA. It's just it incentivizes or monetizes greed, right? Like you just act on your own, like, hey, I need to take care of myself first or else you die, right? So like every human has to take care of themselves first or else you perish. And so it monetizes that greed in people, and hopefully the fear dissipates as time goes on, right? You're never gonna get rid of either of those things completely because we're humans, but that's why I think is again really hard for people to understand, is in that fiat world, it's those things are amplified, fear and greed and fear and greed and fear and greed, and doing it with no leader. Like you said, like there's no leaders, no marketing campaigns. They're outspending, Bitcoiners tens of thousands of dollars to every dollar that a Bitcoiner spends on their own marketing just to build their own business or whatever it is. And that's what I think is really remarkable.
Yeah, and that's I think probably one of the coolest spaces to see evolve right now is this this giving back into the industry, whether it's people that are out there coding, whether it's people that are trying to move organizations like Operation Bitcoin that my good friend and co-host on Bitcoin Veterans runs. That's they're building a veteran army out there through SkillBridge to come into the Bitcoin space, and you're just like, man, this network, we're just getting warmed up and it's exploding, and we're barely able to keep up with these guys. We're not able to keep up with these guys, and it's happening in the same realm as Bitcoin. Is very decentralized. It's just, you have skin in the game. What do you want to do with that skin in the game, and how do you want to move the world? And you start to get a bunch of raving veterans back on a mission and reamped about the idea that America can be free and we can and we should have liberty and you should be sovereign and you shouldn't be paying these parasites out there that you don't want to pay for. Like that is you want to talk about turbocharging a movement is just like I'm excited to be part of it, man, for sure.
So cool. So cool. Do you still have like 5-10 minutes? Are we still good to roll for
Sure.
a few?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Circling back really quick here, I want to touch on Bitcoin veterans a little bit. We can kind of do that in a little bit towards the end, maybe a little bit, but politicians, again, like what do you think we touched on this earlier, that if you're not involved in politics, you're going to be governed by your inferiors. And there's not just vote, like the traditional is like vote with the ammo box or the ballot box, but you can vote with your wallet. You can vote with your feet. You can vote with your voice. And I think those are some of the other areas that people really have to get, used to doing. And what's your prognostication? I'm asking you to look into the future and predict the future a little bit, but just politics existing, going forward, going to the future, credibility of elections. But what do you think the role politics plays like into the future, just in the coming years, coming decades, as Bitcoin starts to, like you said, I mean, as things start to kind of shift and we go into this more hyper Bitcoin world, what does it look like to you? Does politics, do we have like 100 years from now? I don't know. Yeah, money might not exist. I don't know. Like if things have deflated so much, right? Small modular nuclear reactors and Bitcoiners go into these, like we said, the hope thing made me think of this too. Like you were talking about hope earlier, Bitcoin, there's some hope in that orange pill. And that's what I think, again, most people have no idea until you go down this rabbit hole of understanding there's true massive hope inside of Bitcoin and the orange pill.
Yeah, I think as Bitcoin continues to take off, I think we're going to hit this ETF here fairly soon. I don't know when. It could be as late as March, but it could
coming months. Yeah,
it could be sooner than that. I like the idea. Yeah, I like the idea that bankers like to go home fat and happy for Christmas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if they went into a weekend and they said, hey, you know what, ETFs have all been approved by the end of November, I would not be surprised at all.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, when you have tens of trillions of dollars, it could possibly be fighting over the last 7% of the Bitcoin that's going to be mined for the next 100 years to split between, let's just say 85 to 90% of the world population. You get into a place where DC is going to be a little bit erratic, even I should say more erratic than it is now. We're going to be the people that they look at for, last resort, right? They've been talking about peer-to-peer or near peer type of threats in the DoD for a long time. And I don't think that's, I don't think that's Russia. I don't think it's China. I think what they're saying in peer-to-peer is this is secretly, we're gearing up for a fight with America. I don't think that that's going to go well. I think it's actually kind of a non-starter, and it's because of the rank and file. There's a lot of very red, white, and blue patriot, like patriot minded type of people who are in the combat MOSs, which is a very small part of the military. So I think these guys are going to get a little wild and a little erratic in the near term. And then I think they're going to fade off into history. I honestly think that as we continue to do this decentralization thing, that you're going to have more and more localities start to empower their sheriffs. They're going to empower, local people. They're going to largely have to ignore what's going on. And the people that we can get on board earlier to get ahead of the CBDC push that they're going to have to roll out. I think that's going to be kind of their undoing, is the more you try to roll people into a CBDC that is wildly unpopular and comes with a social credit score, the more pushback you're going to have. And that's where things get kind of nuts. But I think after we get through that period of what I think will be small pockets of violence, and then, these politicians probably fleeing for their lives in the country and, all of those things, or possibly dying off, because let's face it, a lot of them are very geriatric.
I was just going to say, yep.
Let's hope. I think in, 10 years from now, we look very different as a nation. I think, it could be that we have balkanized a little bit, or we have, made an effort, in a decentralized effort at that, to be a better country, better people that is, operating at much more of the city state level. And, after that, God knows where it takes us, because, there's going to be some extremely powerful people who emerge from this hyper Bitcoinization. And There's some great thought experiments out there by guys like Alex Svetsky and the rest of those guys in terms of the rise of a kingdom again, a monarch, where you can basically, a monarch's got a giant parcel of land, wants to build citadels and things like that on his land, and comes with a little bit of law that's attached to it. But at the end of the day, that guy is going to probably be like, I think it was the 1100s. It was Eric. I think it was Eric the Red who the Brits put in charge of foreign policy. And, basically their job is supposed to be kind of what the Constitution set up in the first place is you're going to deal with the other states on our behalf, and we're going to make sure you get paid for doing that kind of stuff. But your job is mostly trade and peace. And, because doesn't behoove us to go over there and attack anybody, I think you start getting into this, different area. And, I think you start to see also this other piece in the human history start evolving even that much more, and that's energy.
Yeah.
We have I can't tell you how many times I've seen these guys get to the point where they're about to quote unquote unveil, like let's just say a magnetic engine, like this the law of thermodynamics has gone out the door. And they've engineers were about to release these these blueprints and this technology, and then they get wiped out, they get killed. And so to see decentralization come around in energy to where people are going to be able to print and produce and mass produce that at their local levels, whether they're here in North Georgia and they can harness hydro, or they're out in the plains and they can harness something that may be more like a wind, which I'm not much into the green energy side anyway, but I think there's energy resources out there as we get further along in the Bitcoin movement that are going to help our cause, where we're paying just peanuts for energy. And I mean, and being more, I think consuming more energy than ever, probably in the smartest, most imbalanced way. So all these things added together, I think kind of really create this, I'm not going to say it's going to be utopia, but it is far damn different than, getting fleeced by these parasites now, at the end of the day through force and coercion. So I think, this new incentive structure and communication protocol that is Bitcoin is absolutely going to help us in the long run if we can stay as peaceful as possible.
I think that might have been an episode of Bitcoin even. I was talking to somebody, and I just kind of like was dawning on me that first off, it's like I feel like the hippie bubble. For years, I've always thought the hippie bubble is what we're living through. Yeah. And you have this class that they're, again, we talked about this earlier, pop culture, they're in politics, they're in media, academia, and they just run everything right now. Yeah. And it's really this hippie class. They themselves were taught by the Frankfurt School, again, the Marxists coming over in the 30s, 40s, people being sent over here. Those were the ones that were teaching, the kids when they're in school, and then they grew up in the 60s, 20 years later, and then here they are. It's very like 2 + 2 = 4. These things aren't very hard to figure out when you start looking into it.
Yeah.
And they're going away. Like you said, I mean, we're at the time in the cycle is the fourth turning where those people are going away. They're going into the sunset in one shape or fashion or the other. And you're going to see this huge turn over in politics. In the next 10 years, it'll be wild. Like you said, the 3D printing and the small modular nuclear reactors, AI, renewable energy, that's actually incentivized to, actually do things instead of like the government forcing on everybody. All these different things are coming. 10 years, 20, 15 years from now, life, I think, is going to be 180 degrees radically different. Not utopia. It never will be, utopia. It's not what Earth is, but it's going to be radically different. I think that's the hope and the change that Bitcoiners see first, and then everyone else is coming. They're just a little farther down the line. I think that's the difference. That's the big difference to me.
It makes me so excited to be part of this. I mean, I don't know how I'm sure you are too. It's just, when I think this is studied in human history as a Renaissance period, with
absolutely. We're in the dark ages. Like, I think right now, the hippie bubble to me is that, like, people look back and like, that was like the dark ages, that fiat, last 100 years.
Well, I mean, only ideas, you've seen them as much as I have, where, they want to put giant sails on cargo ships and things like that. What are you talking about? Sustainment? What are you talking about? Sustainment? Why are we pushing a sustainment narrative versus a thriving narrative?
and we can't use energy. Like the funniest thing is like people don't even do you not realize like basic science, like energy doesn't get created or destroyed. It exists and it just changes states. And people are like, we can't use energy. Like, what are you talking about? It's all around you. Every life is energy. Everything is energy. It just changes states, guys. Like, it's not going anywhere. Energy is.
I
Oh
apologize.
man.
I'm getting
No, you're
another
good.
call. I can't stop for some
No,
reason.
you're good, dude. The other thing we were thinking of too is we were talking about, kind of alluded to and made me think of this, which was the current Bitcoin holders. You know, like this time 10 years from now, again, life's gonna be very different, but we might not have Bitcoin conferences in 10 years, right? Life is very different. You're not gonna be like hobnobbing at Bitcoin conferences necessarily. So like as Bitcoiners right now, like enjoy the time, because it's gonna be much different. It'd be a very different world and be a great world and an awesome world to be in. But like the people you're with right now, you might not be with them. Maybe you will be, but you're going to be doing stuff with your family. You're going to be hanging out. Who knows where you'll be living. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And the Bitcoiners of today, and over the last 10 years, and probably the next 5 years, so this 15 to 18-year period from 09 to 2027, we'll say, or 2028, maybe the next halving, two halvings from now, I guess. There's going to be the asset owners of the world coming up, the leaders of the things that are going to happen. That's where it's like you said, you could not be more hopeful to see the people that you know around you now in the Bitcoin space. Like you look around, you're like, wow, these people are going to be like some of the most powerful people in the world in a way. And a lot of them won't want it, but it's going to be the George Washington thing in a way where it's just like, no, you don't want it. And that's exactly why you're going into power.
Right. Yeah, I see it, and boy, I mean, just to be here and to be now, seeing these people, I kind of, there's times when, just for instance, I was down at BitBlock Boom earlier in the year, and BitBlock Boom is a great conference, but in a hall, right? Like you're in a hall, and, as people who are setting up on tables, and you've got this stage that's in there, and it's not, it's not frilly, there's nothing there, but you're literally standing next to some of the greatest minds in Bitcoin that are just walking down a hall. And I kind of relate that to like maybe the early 90s when maybe Steve Jobs was pushing around a computer into some tech type of conference, and you could just sit there and have a conversation with Steve Jobs and rub elbows with one of the greatest minds in the world. And now it's not that you just have a Steve Jobs, you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of these guys who are all now incentivized. Very Hayekian, right? Like if anybody's read read Hayek, the opportunity costs that come with a warfare type of state like we've had in America for a long time, that's pulling a lot of the greatest minds out of the economy to work on solving human problems and solutions and putting it towards making war and destruction. You start to write that, and now you've got engineers that are incentivized to a large degree what they could never do, let's just say in the MIC, to come out and work in this area. Boy, you talk about engineering our way out of this, coding our way out of it, and then kind of having this this I don't know, media piece on top of it all that's just screaming and making more sense and can push down all the FUD at the same time. And to see what these guys are doing with $600 billion versus this apparatus that's out there, that's by the way flooding their capital into this space right now, is just so promising.
It's so cool. Oh man, we need to go buy some more Bitcoin after this. That's for sure.
Smash right now.
Yeah, it's yours. I know we've been going for a little while. But again, we'll have to do this again soon. We touch on more things. There's just so many things we could talk about forever here. Bitcoin veterans, I want to touch on a couple of things here, kind of like a little bit lightning round, but not a little bit. But I want you to talk about Bitcoin veterans and kind of what you guys have going on there, and that initiative, which is awesome.
Yeah. So we started Bitcoin veterans over the summer. Alex Stanzik and I, we both work together at Swan. We had been talking about this for quite some time, that there was a market out there for veterans, and to start addressing it, because there's a network that already exists, right? I mean, there's 16 million veterans in America alone. Wow. And we know a lot of guys overseas, right? So when we started this, we were just kind of looking at it like, well, we'll start a show and see how this thing goes, and automatically, I mean, overnight, people were just like, all right, how do we get in? And we started, these chat groups and everything else. And, now if I go in and I should say this, a couple weeks ago when I go in, I couldn't, 10 minutes go by and there's 200, 300 more messages in there. And I was like, I can't keep up with this. So, we had to decentralize that. There are a bunch of programs that are popping up. I mentioned the 501c3 that Gabe's running. It's called Operation Bitcoin, which trains veterans and people who either transitioning or who just want to get into the Bitcoin space on Bitcoin. So that's happening. I run the Brave post-traumatic stress experience out here. It started off as kind of a veterans based thing, but now is kind of growing into a seeding type of program to where we want this to happen all over the earth. It's just one of those things
cool.
where we've got a lot of mental health issues out there because of the fiat system, and making sense of this and how Bitcoin plays into this realm with mental health is it works. We've got the Warrior program that Alex is running that's training individuals and veterans on security, on weapons manipulation and handling and all that kind of stuff for, more advanced protection in not only our events, but in the citadels that we're working on. We are working on citadels. We are working on, different types of citadels at that. You've got the side that, we all think of as these small city states, but we've also got some more of the spiritual citadels that are going to be a big part of this as well. We've got, I don't know, the media side of this going, marketing, and you name it. Like there's just more and more things popping up all the time to the point where we can't keep up with it. And to see these guys after 21 weeks get to the point where they're at, and continue to grow. Like we're just kind of in the very early stages of this, and to see what's going to happen over the next few years with these guys is, I think, just going to be incredible. So that's Bitcoin Veterans. We run the show every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We will be off for Wednesday because you gotta spend time with the family
sometime.
Yeah, and be present. So but yeah, we'll be back next week after that.
Love it. Cool. Yeah, I will link to all that stuff. What do you like to read? I always try to ask people too, is selfishly, again, I always think of triangulating a position, like a GPS. How are you finding truth? How are you finding, people ask about the news. I'm like, watch 10 different sources, watch all the different channels. What are they, where can you find some symbiosis in between those things and triangulate the truth? Because it's obviously more important than ever right now. But yeah, what are you reading right now, and how are you kind of just discovering news? What's your kind of the way you go about that?
So Bitcoin is Paris right now. I'm sorry, Bitcoin is Venice is what I'm reading right now.
Yeah.
I will tell you, man. I mean, when we talk about 12-pound brains running around in this this area, that book is way up there. I just finished The Way of Men, which I think is something that a lot of dudes need to read. First and foremost, there's been a large attack on masculinity in this country, and self, independence and being, father and creating a good home and, kind of traditional family, which obviously the state, really wants to step in on your behalf, right? Like if there's that was
nicely put. That was
program,
nicely put.
It's a fiat system, but I use Twitter to accumulate a lot of, just kind of what's happening in the world out there. There's some great Substacks out there as well. One of my other colleagues, Mike Hobart, in the Bitcoin veteran space, he's a tremendous writer and just a great young mind that's been part of this group. So between that and then maybe kind of going back in history, I kind of mentioned John Taylor Gatto, and on my highlight shelf over there's 3 books, and I don't know if people can see those or not, but the underground history of the American education system, and then there's weapons of mass instruction, and then there's dumbing us down. And I would say, if you are having trouble kind of letting go of the process of voting for the lesser evil, these are some great books for you to kind of maybe divorce yourself from that, because it kind of takes you back. And I say gives you an excuse, but it takes you back to when you were 5 years old. I think for maybe 90+% of Americans that were not at private school, that weren't homeschooled, the people that went to government indoctrination camps. And I think it kind of gives you the out to say you need to rethink everything that you ever thought you knew about everything. And that's a really that's a starting point for a lot of people that I don't think that they want, because nobody wants to admit they were duped. Nobody wants to admit they were dumb, or no, I've got, my mind is impenetrable. No, it's not. Like, there was weapons grade indoctrination thrown at you by the state when you were 5 years old until you were 18. Like, your prefrontal cortex doesn't even develop until you're 24 years old. So, or roughly. So to be able to kind of go back in history and give yourself a reset and that out to say, look, I need to go relearn some stuff. I think that's one of the best places, because the moment you don't pull the trigger in a voting booth for the least evil person is one of the moments that was most freeing in my life. And I say that because, I don't have to defend a politician for the next 4 years. I didn't give a politician my name. So whether, it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whoever the hell it's going to be this time around in the most important election of our lives, you kind of get to that point where you're like, dude, they all suck. They're all terrible. I don't need to vote for them. I don't need to help them. I don't need to defend them for anything. And I think once you kind of get to that point, now you're going to go down a road where you can dedicate more time to keeping up, I should say, not keeping up with what's in mainstream media, with politicians, with the everyday bullshit that comes out of, the press. And now you can dedicate yourself to actually learning and, diving down this Bitcoin rabbit hole, whether, it's something by Safadine or, my good friend Brian DeMint with Bitcoin evangelism. I mean, VJ, with the bullish case for Bitcoin, like some of the, the greats in the space that are, just tried and true, you start to dive down these and then find other rabbit holes, everything that Bitcoin touches. And, before you know it, you're excited about learning, you're excited about life, you're excited to share these things with people and, give it to them in small doses, right? Like baby birds, don't overfeed them because they'll puke that stuff all up. But yeah, that's kind of how I go about things. I think, once you get to the point where you're learning all the time again and you're excited about learning, I think that's really where we need to be as a species.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. What are two kind of quick ones? What's the thing you are working on right now? Like, what's your big project right now? Is it Bitcoin veterans? Is it something else? Swan? Like, what's your big thing that you're kind of working out on right now?
Yeah, so my daily is I work at Swan on the private side, so I handle a lot of the high net worth individuals over there, and I got to tell you, like, it's busy. And whether
Wow.
it's just people with liquidity that are trying to move it, or it's people that have IRAs or IRAs or
Yeah.
401ks that are really done with the whole getting fleeced by
Yeah.
inflation. That's how I spend most of the day. Then working on Bitcoin veterans, I've got 3 kids and an amazing wife that they're 12, 10, and 9, so trying to be very present with those guys as we homeschool. We also homestead up here in Georgia, so obviously fairly labor intensive with all that kind of stuff. And then just trying to see how we can affect. It's just running all the time between that, and I've kind of let my other show, Radical, lapse a little bit, but it's not over. And that's the thing is, being in this space, you got something to say, get out there and say it. Create a podcast, create a Substack, do whatever it is. We need more and more people talking, whether it's to their local people or to a bigger audience, whatever it is you can contribute, do something.
Do something to get to that 3%, right? The 10 million the people that we need. That's
Yeah.
I've got to minimize collateral damage as much as possible in this transition of monetary systems. Well, where can people find you? Where's the best way to connect with you and find you?
Yeah. If you're interested in Swan, you can always email me at shane.hazel@swanbitcoin.com. If you're looking at the show, you can go to I think it's radicalpod.com. And then there's also bitcoinveterans.org. I should probably know that off the top of my head. It's still a site under construction, but we're on YouTube and Twitter, and it's all under the Bitcoin Veterans handles there, so you can find it there.
Love it. Great stuff, dude. Next time we'll have to I would love to get into the homesteading stuff and kind of talk about your Citadel, kind of the plans for that, just kind of future, what the future looks like for Bitcoiners, and homesteading and all that, homeschooling. I would love to dive more into that. So again, selfishly, homeschool stuff, things I'm working through, and but I think there will be a lot of people obviously that will. It just doesn't get talked enough at the level of like, hey, let's go into it and kind of see what this looks like. So we should do that maybe after the holidays, after Christmas or New Year, and jump in there in January and do that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, Brandon, I appreciate you having me, man. And it's good actually getting to talk to you without.
I know. Seriously, without 1,000 people all around, which is great. It's wonderful. We just kept bumping into each other and just like, okay, yeah, we got to catch up. There's things going on, but we got to catch up. So cool. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to diving into some more of these things in the future here.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I hope you had as much fun as I did speaking with Shane and got something out of it more than anything. He is a wealth of knowledge and truly one of the best people in the Bitcoin space, fighting for freedom, for liberty, for your wealth, your property rights, your freedom of speech. Literally doing it on the battlefield, and then doing it now with his all the movements he's associated with, the Bitcoin veterans at Swan Bitcoin, and the different operators he has worked with and is still working with to this day, promoting that very aspect. And obviously on the Bitcoin front, the biggest game, the greatest war that we are fighting right now is the war of the state versus the individual. And he is in the thick of it more than anyone, sharing debate stages with Governor Kemp and Stacey Abrams over the last few years. He has been in the arena. If there's one person that's been in the arena, it is Shane Hazel. So I hope you enjoyed this. We're going to talk about next time homesteading and Citadel's homeschooling, and really diving deep into what he is doing to build a life. And as he said, this is a world where people are realizing they have to become actually reliant on themselves. And that's going to be the biggest wake-up call and the biggest change to real abundance going forward. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please share this out. The algorithm hates truth, hates it. Please question everything with boldness, even the existence of God himself. Trust but verify. We'll see you on the next one.